Hello and welcome to a short video overview of the Wharfedale SUPER LINTON loudspeaker. The SUPER LINTON, as the name suggests, is an enhanced version of the Wharfedale Linton. Linton is a big deal for Wharfedale. It is their best-selling speaker, and when I say that, I don't mean it's their best-selling heritage speaker. It is the single speaker that they sell more of than anything else in the range, including ones that are substantially cheaper and are extremely good. Whatever your feelings about retro, and we'll come to that, it's big business for them. Now, something that Wharfedale did historically with various models was make them super. So there would be Model X, in this case Linton, and then there would be an enhanced version. We've already seen them do this in recent history. The Denton, and Denton 85 I should say, became the Super Denton. Now we didn't do a video for the Super Denton, but we did issue it a recent Editor's Choice Award because it is extremely good. It's a very novel piece of equipment, a very compact three-way loudspeaker, but it does things that are genuinely unusual and extremely likeable. With the Super Linton, Wharfedale hasn't been quite so bold, but there are good reasons for that, mainly that the Linton is a success story and they're selling a boatload of them. As such, this is a much less heavily revised, at least on the outside speaker, than the Super Denton is over the standard Denton. The cabinet is 4 centimetres taller than a standard Linton, which is not a particularly significant change. You can spot it if you place them side by side, but for the most part they're pretty similar. This is helped by the fact that this is the same width as the standard Linton, and there are very good reasons for that, namely that it goes on the same stand. This is a useful thing because the stand is a really nice piece of industrial design, and even if it wasn't, your options for other stands that accommodate a speaker of these dimensions are quite limited. So IAG, parent company of Wharfedale, has very wisely worked on the principle that one stand should fit both models. There's also the same number of drivers as a standard Linton, and they look very similar. They're not the same. Bass driver, 203 mils, 8 inches in old money, woven Kevlar. The basic appearance is the same, but Wharfedale has gone and beefed this one up. Larger motor assembly, beefed up magnets in the pursuit of more bass response, and we'll come to that a bit later on. This hands over to a 5-inch, 127mm in new money, mid-range driver, again Kevlar. This looks the same, but inside it's now in its own chamber, which makes it rather less susceptible to anything else that the speaker is doing. This in turn then hands over to a 25mm soft dome tweeter. This again looks very similar, but it has more in common with the Super Denton soft dome tweeter, which in turn borrows technology from the flagship and enormous Dovedale. All of this is placed in a cabinet which, as I say, is slightly larger, but what you can't see is that it's substantially more rigid. It's another implementation of constrained layer damping, so 2 layers of MDF with a non-setting material in the middle, which basically absorbs resonances and unwanted energy. This is a fairly hefty speaker to move around. I've done some of that. I don't necessarily recommend doing it unless you absolutely have to. It's rear ported, same as the standard Linton. There are 2 reasonably large rear ports on the back and a single wide set of speaker terminals. What you can't see behind those speaker terminals is the most important change to this loudspeaker. Super Linton has a substantially more sophisticated crossover than the standard Linton. That's a single board. I've never actually critically reviewed the Linton, so this is more based on reading, but it would appear that a number of people feel that the crossover in the standard Linton is the weakest point of the loudspeaker. Wharfedale's keen to avoid that being the case with its super variant, so where the Linton crossover is a relatively compact undertaking on a single board, this is a giant thing, comes on 2 boards and has substantially better components used throughout. Crossovers are fundamentally unglamorous things, but they make an enormous difference to how the loudspeaker sounds. So Wharfedale putting some money and some energy into improving that is likely to result in substantial gains in performance. And given the relatively tight price difference between the 2 speakers, that's where most of the outlay seems to have gone. we need to talk about how this speaker looks, because let's be honest, this isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea. I'm quite partial to retro. I have sort of a fondness for the 20th century. Even so, this is still not necessarily my thing, but it's very hard to argue with the fact that if the standard Linton is selling in the quantities that it is a number of people's preference, and Wharfedale hasn't messed around with the basics. 3 finishes are available: mahogany, walnut and black, none of which are desperately modern or trying to be desperately modern. What I will say is that this is a superbly bolted together piece of kit for the asking price. It really does feel substantial. It feels like furniture. It looks like furniture to a given value of furniture. And if you are in for this sort of aesthetic, there's not a lot at the price which is going to give you that same perception of scale, quality and presence that this thing does. We also need to talk about how they sound. Again, this is not the same as my experiences with the Super Denton. This is not a speaker that I think reinvents what you should expect at the price point. However, like the Super Denton, this isn't an old sounding loudspeaker. It might look retro, but it's not. These are new drivers. This is an inert cabinet. When you listen to actual in-period designs that look like this, you are listening to a lot of cabinet energy. This just doesn't do that. So long as it's placed with any degree of care and attention, it does a commendable job of disappearing from the soundstage that it's placed in. With that being said, it does leverage a degree of retro, which is this wide baffle with a large driver. There's a space and an effortlessness to what this speaker does that very little else at the price can get near, because of the simple way that physics works. It's not to say that this speaker has more bass, really, in an out-and-out depth sense than either a standard Linton or other options available at £2,000. What it does do, and it does it exceptionally effectively, is fill out the lower registers and give it an effortlessness which smaller driver speakers don't necessarily replicate. Running the Super Linton at low levels with music which has analog bass rather than big hulking bits of digital, it's a unique experience. I don't like using the word unique because it gets misused, but there isn't anything else at this sort of price point that does exactly the same thing as this. It just feels fuller, bigger, more vibrant. It's a very, very likeable sound, and it's a likeable sound that's helped further by generally very, very good tonality. Everything that I've played on it has sounded as I would intend it to be, and a really pleasant balance between detail, energy at the top end, and refinement. Would I buy them? Well, as noted earlier, this is not necessarily my preferred aesthetic. IAG is making the Mission 770 and Mission 700 for people like me, and I'm delighted with that. Clearly, a lot of people are going for this aesthetic in a big way. There's an argument to be said for, audio systems can take two approaches. They can either be sort of something that blends Magnolia-like into the background of a room, or something that is a focal point and something that you talk about when it's there, and you're going to talk about these. I do get it, even if it's not necessarily for me. There are also some formidable loudspeakers at the sort of £2,000 price point, although when I'm talking about this £2,000 price point, it's worth pointing out that that's inclusive of the stand. So when I talk about the Neat Petite Classic at £2,000, which is still one of the very best loudspeakers you can buy anywhere near the price, that is not inclusive of stands. So unless you've already got a decent pair of them, and it's not outside the realms of possibilities that you do, it's not the same deal as the Super Linton. It really is an awful lot of loudspeaker for the money, and I can't argue with the fact that it brings something a little bit different to this price point over and above the competition. As such, whilst it's perhaps not exactly what I am looking for, I think it is what a number of people are looking for, and I think that Wharfedale is going to do extremely well with it. If you've enjoyed this rambling diatribe from a new sofa, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. There will be more of these. It always sounds vaguely like a threat, but that's just what we're going to be doing. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.